In this video, I'm going to tie together several concepts from previous videos. First of all, I'm going to integrate a JSON API stream, which we have done before, but this time it's going to be another separate API stream that tells us a little bit about weather. Now, this requires an API key, so I'm going to use the API key secrets that we did in a previous video to keep the API key secret and then pull it in programmatically. As a matter of fact, I've already added it to my secrets. If you're curious how to do that, I'll just point you to the video where I show how to do it, but I've already created a secret for this API. So a little bit of review and a little bit of integration likely in this video, and then we're going to show a message to the user based on what the current weather is at that location. So first of all, weatherbit.io is a service, and there are several like this, but it's a service that will give you weather data. You can get a certain amount for free, but then after a while you have to start paying, which is why it requires an API key. So I put in Cincinnati as the city, and this is the JSON that I've received. And so I can put it into QuickType, which I've already done. I need to give it a name. We'll call it weather. And I need to give it a namespace. We'll call it weather feed. List is good, and I think we're good. I can either hit copy code or I can just highlight and copy. And now we go back to Visual Studio, and let's go ahead and add a class for this. Paste in what we got from QuickType and save. Again, because I've already integrated JSON streams, I've already added Newtonsoft package to this project and several other things. So I don't anticipate a whole lot of things that I would normally do if I'm starting up. So it looks like we have that taken care of. Now we're doing all of our integration in the getData function, or getData method here in our index.cshtmlcs. Now in the interest of making the most out of our asynchronous calls, I've moved a lot of the asynchronous calls to the start of the method so they can get started. Then I have an await down lower, which is when we actually need the data. But by starting them early, we can fire off this async call and fire off multiple async calls, in this case 3 of them simultaneously, and allow them to do their work and hear back, and then assemble together all the data and push it back to our page. So first, let me assemble the URL of the endpoint I need to call. The first part I simply grab from the browser. Now the next part, I'm going to borrow this API key stuff I did in a prior video. Simply paste it up above and change the name a little bit. I called mine Weather API Key. And now we simply append that to the end of our endpoint. Now let's start our task as we've done up above. So the task is going to start when I invoke this client.getAsync. And we know we start that at the top of the method to give it time to work with the other async methods. Now what I'll do is towards the bottom, I will add an await. And we will store the result of that in our response message. And from that response, we can get the string data that exists at that endpoint. It's JSON data formatted. It's not objects just yet, but we'll use QuickType to turn it into objects. And through a couple more steps where we want to read in the data, we finally save the data to a variable called weather.json. Now at this point, we can start using the QuickType generated code that we put into that weather class. This will take a string of JSON and convert it to a series of objects. You see, it returns to us a weather object. Now the structure is a little tricky to navigate because you see we have an object, then we have an array of data that contains exactly one object with a bit of a tricky hierarchy. All we really need out of here is precipitation. If you take a look down here, we have precip 0. So notice that the array is called data. Well, there's a little grammatical thing that's not well known here is data is plural, datum is singular. So a singular piece of data is a datum. And that's important here because that's how they've decided to name these classes. So if you're not aware, that's what it is. So back to where we were, if I say weather.data, remember that's the plural data that represents that array. Alt-Enter, let's go ahead and assign this to a new local variable. And look at the local variable type. It is a list of datum or singular data objects, if that helps. So we'll call it weather data. So weather data represents all of the individual datum. Now what we can do is loop over this collection of weather data and find the datum that has our precip in it. Okay, so weather data, collection of individual weather datum. We iterate over the weather data. Each time we loop, we shake hands with another weather datum individual object, of which there's likely only one. We ask it for its precipitation. We store that into a long value here. And now from that, I can do just a silly if test. We see we're putting up a message to the user based on if we think it's going to be dry, we need to water plants, or rain's expected, no need to water. Because remember, in a previous video, we took all the specimens at the Cincinnati Zoo. We looked at those that like water, and that's the filtered list that we are creating and showing to the user. So now in addition to that, we're also adding some more decision support to say whether or not we anticipate that these will need to be watered. Now, with that, we'll go back to our CS/HTML page. I'm going to get rid of this API key that I was using earlier, and I'm going to change that to message. And let's see what happens. Now, I can't control the weather, and it's been dry so far in Cincinnati today, but we might just have to go through the debugger and see what we get for precip and test it that way. Of course, the other nice thing about the debugger is we can always change values and experiment with it that way too. Let's see what we get first right off the bat. We get the message, it's dry, water these plants. Now, let's make sure that it's actually getting weather data. So I'm going to snap a breakpoint right where it starts to get the weather data, and I'm going to refresh the page. We see that the breakpoint stops, so I choose F10 to step over. Now we have our weather JSON feed. Okay, getting our weather data. Let's take a look at some of these variables so far. So we see that this, if I mouse over it, is a JSON look and feel. We can see some escape characters in there, but we see the typical curly square bracket quotes, colons, the things that we would tend to see in a JSON string. So we keep going. And now we're going to grab our precip. Aha! And we have precip. So what precip did we get from weather? More than likely 0. Okay, well that's cool. Well, we've already seen what happens when there's 0 precip. Let's change this to something like 10. Oh, fine, we'll make it 9. Something that will cause the if test to go to the else part. So notice I'm just changing it live here, right before I run the if test. Now, I run the if test, and note it comes to the else part, and it says rain expected, no need to water. I press F5, and we return to our page. And we see a different message this time, rain expected, no need to water. So in this video, we've seen how to consume a third JSON source of information, one that has a bit of a more complex structure, and also one that requires an API key. Make that call, and then add it to our page. So as always, I hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.